What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining us. As always, it is very much appreciated. Boy, oh boy, we've got a lot to get to today. A report from Greg Bedard, Boston Sports Journal, that came out recently, last day or two, about some of these Patriots draft picks and the concerns about their character and all of that. We have to get into this, and I will break it down, give you my thoughts on how I feel about each executive quote, what they had to say, whether to take it seriously or not. Let's start here. The Patriots draft was much heralded. You look across pretty much the football universe online, and everybody was giving it a B, B minus, A plus. I don't think I saw one grade that had a C, not a single grade. So a lot of people thought the Patriots draft was pretty much a home run, if not at least a double. But as more time passes, more digging is done, more people talk, and we will have these red flags pop up. So let's go to Greg Bedard's article from this week at Boston Sports Journal. He spoke to NFL execs. Here's what one said about Jayvon Baker. Quote, so for us, he was a non-fit. Grade-wise, off the board in parentheses. Guys had him in that 5th round range. His character stuff was a concern. Heavy maintenance. There was a deal where there was a car that pulled up next to him that was with 4 white males who made racist comments towards him. He flashed a gun. The police showed up. He was honest with them. That was in 2021. Then there's a bunch of just stuff from reckless driving, multiple fights, suspensions at Alabama, went to jail, charge was dropped. There's multiple gun incidents and some other stuff. Family background history is not great, so there's a lot of stuff with him. From another NFL executive talking to Greg Bedard about Baker. Quote, the stories about Caleb Williams' father, this is times 10. Gerrod Baker wants to be a part of everything. Everything is about money. If Jayvon's not playing, there could be an issue. He's not afraid to stick his nose in. When the kid is away from his father, it wasn't so bad. If he's there and involved, look out. Alabama didn't want him back. He was supposed to transfer to Kentucky, but that didn't work out. Why not? They did their due diligence on Alabama. He was supposed to go back to UCF for 2024 on a big NIL deal. He took the upfront money, declared for the draft the next day. There's going to be litigation on that. Bedard writes, one Patriots team source said Baker showed up for rookie minicamp with an entourage as a 4th-round pick. Baker's draft night reaction video did not go over well with the Patriots. One league executive told Bedard, quote, I think there's a good side to the kid, and I think, in the right situation, it'll be all right. Inside, he's not a terrible kid. It's just his environment with the father has been so bad, and he's been living his life of entitlement, unquote. One league executive estimated that Baker was off the board for half the league. All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to unpack from all of those quotes. I'll start here. A lot of the stuff on Baker isn't good, right? I mean, what I just read you, it's not good. Anybody could read those quotes and say, doesn't sound like a great thing. Doesn't sound like this young man has it figured out just yet. I would also point out that the sources speaking to Bedard, they really don't have any reason to dump on Jayvon Baker or any other prospect. The draft is over. They're not angling to get the guy. They're not angling trying to hurt somebody's stock, so to speak. So when you get these quotes after the draft, I do think they're more genuine than before the draft because, there's really no agendas, so to speak, being served. Lots of guys have stuff. Lots of these draft picks that were drafted in late April, they have stuff. They have issues. They have background questions. They have family questions. They have friend questions. They have partying questions. They have fighting questions. They have grade questions. A lot of these guys that get drafted, they have questions. My question always is how serious are the questions regarding somebody's character? What specifically did the person do and how much did they do it, etc.? So how serious is the stuff being talked about regarding Baker? I think some of this stuff is serious. I'll get into that in a minute. Some of the things that the executive said to Bedard, they're serious. They're serious things that I would question and I would be concerned with. I also ask, how much was this young man a quote unquote problem? How many things came up? How much is on the resume? If it's a one-time incident, it's a one-time incident from a young man. If it's multiple, all right, how many times are we talking? I think those aspects of this conversation need to be addressed. Before I dig deeper into this, I want to remind you that the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by my friends at Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. 30-plus acres of land to have some fun. They've got paintball, airsoft, kid versions of both. Every age group, starting at 6+, they have something for you. Show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They take care of the rest. It's casual. It's low key. Staff is top notch. These guys support this podcast financially by sponsoring it. Can't say enough about that. So it's all about supporting local companies and businesses with this podcast. Let's help out and support Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. If you want to have some fun, head on over. Give them a call at 401-228-6366, 401-228-6366, and tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. So as far as Jayvon Baker, I'm not so worried. I'm not so worried about the dad, okay? Like, I bought into the whole LaMelo Ball, Lonzo Ball, the Ball family, right? Everybody was concerned about how Lonzo and LaMelo would be affected, impacted by his father. They had a reality TV show. They were trying to create their own sneaker brand. There were all these complications with that family. And inevitably, none of it really hurt. None of it really hurt anybody, right? Lonzo ended up being really good before he got injured. LaMelo's been really good, even though he's been somewhat injury prone. So all that talk, all that chatter about Lonzo Ball and LaMelo Ball and being impacted by his father and the family, it pretty much went nowhere. So I spent a lot of time talking about those things, right? So I would not put as much attention into the father stuff. Those things happen, right? As far as money and the NIL deal, look, he's a college kid. It's about securing your future. It's about getting money. So as far as the father, it being all about money, he might be just looking out for his son and trying to take care of his son and making sure that his son is set up for the future. When you get to the NFL, things are more structured. Jayvon Baker will have a rookie deal. It is structured. He's going to get paid what he's going to get paid. And if he's going to continue to get paid in the NFL, he's going to have to behave correctly off the field. He's going to have to produce on the field. He will have to earn that next contract. So I'm not really worried about that. The reckless driving, it's a misdemeanor here in Massachusetts. Reckless driving could mean roughly a dozen different things. I'm not overly concerned by the reckless driving. The litigation as far as the NIL deal, I don't care. It's not like he's going on trial for murder. I would imagine that case will get settled. It'll be forgotten, and we won't talk much about it at all. But the serious stuff, I do think we have to treat as serious. Multiple gun incidents, it's a serious thing. When somebody's flashing a gun, even though we're talking about, 4 white males in a car saying racist, dumb stuff, you still don't want to be flashing guns. It's never a good idea. And the executive tells Bedard that there were multiple gun incidents. And you could look at somebody like Jahm as an example, right? Extremely talented guy, but he just had this penchant of hanging around the wrong people, and he started to do some silly stuff on social media. That silly stuff grew into more serious stuff. He's flashing guns. He's getting into fights. His friends are jumping people at his house after a basketball game. Those kinds of acts, those kinds of serious allegations and gun waving, that has to be taken seriously. It has to be taken seriously. I don't think that's a joke whatsoever. The multiple fights, I need specifics to evaluate that. I mean, there's lots of different interpretations of a fight, right? Was it mutual combat? Did Jayvon Baker get into a fight with some kid and they were fighting over a girl? Maybe they were both at a party and they got into a fight. They got into a scrap. Like, I don't read too much into the multiple fights unless I have the specific details. If it's mutual combat, it means nothing to me. Was Jayvon Baker dealing with something self-defense wise? One of those fights. How many fights is multiple? 2, 3, 7, 10? Just not enough specifics. And I don't like that. I don't like when executives pop off the mouth and they don't give the specifics. When you say multiple fights, how many fights? What was involved? Give me the details. If we're going to throw this young man's character under the bus, then give me the details of it. So I don't know. It could have been 2 fights, one over a girl, one over something stupid like a video game. We have no clue. How badly were people injured in the fight? Was it a pushing contest? Did somebody slap somebody else? Like, without those details, I don't know. Was it a scrum? Were there a bunch of people involved and Jayvon Baker happened to be in the middle of it, but he didn't throw any punches? He was just involved in the scrum. So give me more details on that. Something else that didn't have enough detail. Why did he go to jail? There's no description as to what was charged. What charge was dropped? I don't think that's fair to Jayvon Baker. I don't think it's fair to throw it out there that he went to jail and then say the charge was dropped. Why did he go to jail? Why was the charge dropped? Was he innocent? Is that why the charge was dropped? So some of this from the executives, some of it bothers me because there's not enough detail. If you're going to question somebody's character, if you're going to throw stuff out there, be specific about it. Tell me how many fights. Tell me the nature of the fights. Tell me what happened as far as going to jail, the charge dropped. Was that part of the fighting? Was that part of another case? Was that part of the reckless driving? What are we doing? What are we doing? Why were the charges dropped? We don't know. Something else that bugged me was the suspensions. They say he was suspended at Alabama. They say plural, suspensions with an S. How many times was he suspended? Why was he suspended? We don't know. It's just thrown out there by this executive. I don't like that. Give me more. I remind myself of Ryback for the wrestling fans. You know, give me more. I don't know if it was give me more or something else, me more, but you get the point. So I don't like the lack of detail from these executives behind the fight comment, behind the jail comment, behind the suspension comment. I need a lot more to evaluate what the hell was going on, right? The entourage. That's one source's interpretation. What is an entourage to that one source? Is an entourage 2 people? Is it 4 people? Who was part of this entourage? Feed me more. Thanks, Sports Unlimited. It was feed me more. You know, who's part of the entourage? Is it his father? Is it a cousin? Is it a brother? Is it a friend? Is it a couple of friends? I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with a player showing up with a couple of people that he trusts and he knows so he can feel more comfortable. Again, there's a lack of detail with the entourage comment. When you lack detail, when you lack specifics, and you just talk about multiple fights, and you talk about going to jail, but the charge was dropped, when you talk about an entourage, it paints a certain picture about the young man. And I don't think that picture was painted in a fair way by these executives. These comments are too general. It's throwing stuff up against the wall at a certain point. I will say again, the gun stuff, I would seriously look at that. The gun stuff would concern me. A lot of these other things that were pointed to, I need more detail. 2 silver linings, I would also say. He was honest with the cops, right? Jayvon Baker was honest with the cops. When the 4 white males pulled up beside of him and he showed the gun, cops showed up, he told the cops exactly what happened. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that he was honest with law enforcement, told them what the hell happened, didn't try to shade the story in any kind of way, didn't try to, quote unquote, get away with it. None of that. He was honest with the cops. That's a good thing. I also point to the comment from one of these executives that said, quote, I think there's a good side to the kid, and I think, in the right situation, it'll be all right. He's not a terrible kid. It's just his environment. Isn't that the most important thing out of all of that? The most important thing out of all of this is that at least one league executive says, I think he's a good kid. He's not a terrible guy. He might have to clean up the circle a little bit. All right. More to come. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, it costs you nothing to like, comment, and subscribe with this podcast. It's absolutely free. All it does is help us. The more thumbs up on the YouTube channel obviously means more eyeballs as we build this community. Like, comment, and subscribe. By the way, thanks to your support, there was a pretty cool feature written on me today by Barrett Sports Media. It's free to access. I tweeted that out at Nick C Radio. If you want to check it out, again, at Nick C Radio on Twitter. It was a fantastic feature about, what I'm doing here and also working at 98.5 on Memorial Day morning. You should check it out if you enjoy the podcast. I don't think that happens if it wasn't for your support. And we continue to build this up as we move forward and get closer and closer to actual football. Spotify, Apple Pods, people, don't forget to rate and review. All right, some other concerns were voiced about other prospects. I want to dig through those for a couple of minutes here. One league executive said on Kaden Wallace, quote, there's a tiny bit of the entitlement from the family. They're well educated. I'll get to that in a second. But it's really more a love of football / laziness issue, that type of thing, not anything major off the field. I didn't understand this. The well-educated comment seems a bit of a hardo thing to say, right? Oh, he's entitled. He came from a well-educated family. Is that insecurity from this executive? I didn't quite understand marrying the entitlement and well-educated. I think you can be well-educated and not entitled. So I don't really understand that. It seems like a very stereotypical thing to say about somebody. Oh, they're entitled. His parents have some kind of fancy pants degree. Is that the actual reality of the situation? Or is that the executive, reading into what the family has accomplished from their own point of view? So I didn't quite get that. The laziness, here's the story about Kaden Wallace. If you didn't know, Kaden Wallace reportedly didn't take things too seriously early on in his career at Penn State. He didn't work as hard as the coaches wanted him to work, and that bothered. That bothered some of the coaches at Penn State. But here's the part that we have to pay attention to. He was told this, and then last year, he worked hard. Last year, he turned things around. That's the story of Kaden Wallace. The story of Kaden Wallace is that, yes, there was some laziness reportedly early on at Penn State, but then he figured it out. He figured it out. He turned things around. He worked harder, and he played better last year because of it. So if you're the Patriots, are you drafting the Kaden Wallace of old who didn't take things as seriously as his coaches wanted him to take things? Or are you drafting Kaden Wallace from last year who says, the light went off, his production picked up, his coaches were happy with him, and it certainly seems like he was a young man that figured some things out. So how do you read that situation? If you're an optimist, you would say they drafted the Kaden Wallace that figured things out, that had that light go off, and they're not drafting somebody who's just lazy. And he knows he'll need to get it, quote unquote, to receive a second deal in the NFL, right? He's going to have to work hard, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. Now, I would say when you go back to Jayvon Baker, Jayvon's only a fourth-round guy. So in the fourth round, you can take some more risks. If you do happen to draft Wallace like the Patriots did at the top of the third round at a position of need at offensive tackle, you really need him to work out. So if it ends up that they swung and missed on something, if they decided, we drafted Wallace thinking that he was last year's Wallace and not the first couple 3 years Wallace at Penn State, and Wallace does end up having some work ethic issues and he doesn't work out for you, then that's a big miss because it's at the top of the third round. And we've also had the conversations about how they could have moved up and drafted other offensive tackles. They could have done different things, right? So that one we have to pay real close attention to because of the investment into Wallace versus the investment into Baker. How about Joe Milton? Well, there was talk about Joe Milton. Executives on Joe Milton. He was still on our board, but he was heavy maintenance. And the main thing was just like the pro approach, he's a partier, or at least he was earlier in his career. Confidence, mental toughness, how he handled losing his job his second year. There were some concerns with that. The biggest thing is the maturity of being able to handle that position and being the guy that you want. First in the building, last out. Like, how much extra is he willing to do to reach that next level would be the question. But, big but here, by all accounts, he was a good kid, just immature. It's a concern because he's 24 years old. So it's not like he's a young guy. Let me first say this. Lots of quarterbacks, lots of wide receivers, lots of cornerbacks are about maintenance. Can we just be truthful here? Lots of quarterbacks, even today in the NFL, would be seen as, quote unquote, high maintenance. High maintenance. Lots of wide receivers are seen as high maintenance. Cornerbacks are seen as high maintenance. But a lot of those guys end up working out and being fine, productive in their NFL careers. So I'm never really worried about the high maintenance stuff. Russell Wilson is tremendously high maintenance, and he won a Super Bowl with Seattle and has had a very successful career. The party quote about Joe Milton is 100% unfair. 100% unfair. For the executive to say this, I think is ridiculous. Like the exec, let me go back to what the executive said about Joe Milton's partying. He's a partier, or at least he was earlier in his career. Like, what are we doing? The executive is admitting in that comment that he has no idea if Joe Milton is a partier. He was a partier. He doesn't know if he's a partier right now. So why even say that? Why even say that comment? That's, that's throwing the young man under the bus. Oh, he was a partier. How many? Let me ask you this question. I don't know about you. I know about me. How many of us partied when we were like 18 to 22 years old? I'll raise my hand. I'll raise my hand. I went to a lot of keg parties at URI. I started drinking beer when I was like 13 years old, okay? Not the proudest thing in the world, but I went to parties. I went to keg parties. I still go to parties. I go to friend parties. I went to a party on Saturday and drank beers and hung out. So what are we doing with that? He was a partier. Okay. A lot of college kids are partiers, and you don't know if he's still a partier. Then why the hell are you even saying it? Hated that. 100% unfair to Joe Milton. That is dog bleep. Hated that comment. If he's a partier, if he's doing coke, if he's going bananas at 24 years old and he's irresponsible and he's missing practices and all of this stuff because he's out late 3 a.m. partying like an animal. All right. I get it. That could be part of the conversation. Is he going to be able to mature quickly as he transitions to the NFL and gets more money? But just partying when you're young doesn't mean that you're a jerk, doesn't mean that you're not responsible, doesn't mean that you can't do your job, doesn't mean that you won't produce. None of that. So what are we doing with that comment? Hated it. Hated it. And when we talk about a player's work ethic in college, we have to understand that a lot of these players, they had their jobs in college. Now, does it make it right? No, it doesn't. But they felt safe. They felt comfortable. It's a completely different world when they get to the NFL level. Joe Milton as QB1 at Tennessee, he's not so worried about it, right? Like, he's got the job. He knows he's better than everybody else on that campus. He's not worried. He's a college kid feeling free, whatever. I'm still going to be the guy on Saturday. Fighting for your life professionally, being a quarterback 3 or a quarterback 4 in camp is completely different. And let me remind you, Joe Milton was a 6th-round pick. Jayvon Baker was a 4th-round pick. Inherently, the later you get into the draft, all of these guys have flaws, whether it's on the field, off the field, personality-wise, family. They poop too much. They talk too much. They might have drank too much beer one Friday night at a party. All of these guys have flaws. They might be short. They might be skinny. They might be slow. They might be fat. They might be lazy. As you get later in the draft, all of these players will have questions. More in a minute. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. All of those things mean an awful lot to the show. How about Jahm Bell? Executive says, personality-wise, there's a lot with him. He was a borderline non-fit off the board for us. The questions or concerns were personality fit. Here we go again with the diva stuff. Diva, selfish, party habits. Do you get these themes from these executives? Partier, diva. It seems to be a lot of the same kind of themes. Emotional maturity, the executive says. He needs structure, talking about Jahm Bell. Some juvenile stuff, immature. Will he own up to the mistakes? What has he learned? What is he going to do to be different? And then, quote, I think looking at his stuff, he's probably more of a light maintenance than heavy. There were some disciplinary issues in high school, a lot of stuff just when he was younger. What are we doing? What are we doing? Disciplinary reasons, disciplinary stuff when he was in high school. Again, I ask you, how many people do you know that when they were in high school, they got into trouble? How many high school kids do things without thinking it through? You know what it's called? It's called growing up. It's called developing. It's called being probably the best athlete in your high school, thinking you can get away with anything, and acting a fool every once in a while. I don't look at high school immaturity as a knock on a guy who just got drafted to go to the NFL. When in high school, did he have some immaturity issues when he was like 16 years old? I am not alarmed at all with this Jahm Bell stuff. I'm not alarmed at all by most of this stuff, frankly. I'm just not. I don't know how you can say that Jahm Bell is a diva or he was selfish when he was at South Carolina and played everywhere. Does that smell like a diva? Does that smell like somebody who's selfish? He played in the slot. He played on the outside. He played in the backfield. Does that scream to you somebody who is selfish and a diva? That screams to me, before transferring to Florida State, that he was a young man who was willing to do whatever was asked of him on offense to help the football team. That would fly in the face of being called a diva and being called selfish. His party habits, again with that stuff, we went through it. Late teens, early 20s, the party stuff. Did it hinder him? Did going to parties with his buddies in college, did it affect his play on the field? Did it impact his practice habits? That's what I want to know. I don't care if the kid went out and partied. Couldn't care less. Again, unless he's, bumping rails or going bananas with drugs, then we got an issue. But if he's smoking a little weed and he's sitting there and drinking beers and having drinks, welcome to college. I mean, let's be adults here. Welcome to college. Light maintenance. I don't even know what the hell that means. High school discipline, get out of my face. So the overall 30,000-foot view of this class, one league executive asked, what are the Patriots doing? They're taking way more character, work ethic risks than they did under Bill. Normally, they have one a year. There's 4 or 5 guys in this draft alone. I remind you, Bill Belichick drafted Aaron Hernandez, who had a lot of red flags and issues, right? Took a risk. But I don't look at these guys. I don't equate all of them with each other, right? Again, the Jayvon Baker stuff, to me, the gun stuff, that's the most serious by far that's mentioned here. The work ethic stuff, okay. Did they get better throughout their career? Right? I mean, there's a point in this story that somebody tries to throw Jalen Polk out there and say that he had a red flag. Now, thankfully, Bedard mentioned that everybody he spoke to was like, what? Jalen Polk, red flag? Didn't hear a damn thing about that. So we're talking about 2 or 3 people here and their opinion of somebody. So I'll say this. If you are a league executive and you happen to be a hardo, you're going to look at somebody who's not a hardo and question their work ethic. Doesn't mean they have crappy work ethic. Maybe not. Maybe they're just not a hardo like you are. You might be a league executive who never enjoyed partying when you were younger. You might look down at drinking and all of that. You might think it's got to be business. You're playing college football at a high level. You've got to be serious. You've got to be dug in the playbook. Other people who are executives in the league might look at it and say, yeah, the dude went to parties every once in a while because he was going to Tennessee, and Tennessee is an awesome college to party at, and he had a few drinks. He would hang out with his buddies, but he showed up to practice. He went out there on Saturday and he played his ass off. So we have to understand that every executive, every person that talks in a story like this, they're talking from their point of view. And how they see other people is how they see them. I might get the details about Jayvon Baker and feel even worse about his situation. Or I might feel better when the executive says, oh, he had multiple fights. If I find out that he got into a fight because somebody said something awful to a girl, is that not understandable? You don't excuse everything, but is that not more understandable? If he got into a scrap because there was a bunch of people at a party and all of a sudden somebody pushed him and he turned around and punched the guy in the face. Okay, that's a fight, but it's a different kind of fight. Now, what happens if it was like him and 3 of his buddies who jumped somebody and beat the bag out of the kid? That's different. So there's a lot of like generalities here. Again, I look at Jayvon Baker and the stuff that was in that, there's some serious stuff there. I'm a lot less worried about possible laziness, possible work ethic, and, partying in college. This is not, Drake May. They didn't spend a top pick. They didn't draft somebody number 3 who has a long history of partying and acting a fool. If you tell me that their 7th round pick went to some parties, I can live with it. Their 6th round pick went to parties, at least when they were younger. I think I could live with it. So there are some bigger picture things here, though, I would say. Number 1, this is Elliot Wolf's first draft. So I think you look at it and you say to yourself, all right, did he respect the process? Did he, did he respect that process of digging into character? How much homework did they do? I have to imagine that Elliot Wolf, who's been in the league for a long, long time, understands how to dig in and research into prospects. I have to imagine Elliot Wolf did not sit there in the war room and say, oh, all right, let's just draft a bunch of knuckleheads and go bananas here. Right? Edge sanity. I don't know what you're talking about. Number one, stay away from politics. You don't know my politics. If you want my politics, I'll tell you. I'm independent. I'm a registered independent. I've been a registered independent since I was 18 years old. So get off my lawn. Okay, let's stop throwing people into buckets, my friend. Number two, how am I defending bad behavior when I just said if the gun stuff is a very serious concern of mine? I have issues with people waving guns around. Right? How am I defending the behavior? I said I want more details behind the fighting. I want more details as to why he went to jail and the charge was dropped. You don't want details on that? You just want to label the young man and say, oh, he got into multiple fights and he went to jail one night without any other detail. We're just gonna label the young man, and we're gonna do that. We're gonna play that game. I don't believe in labeling people. The opposition to authority. Well, you know what, Edge Sanity? Not in every case, but I do think we have examples of authority taking advantage of their authority. Did you just see what happened with Scotty Scheffler? Do you think that cop took advantage of his authority in that situation? By the way, all charges dropped against Scheffler, and both sides agreed not to bring litigation. Why is that? Because the cop was out of pocket. Not every cop, not every person with power. The depth and the breadth of Jayvon Baker, the allegations, to me, yes, they are troubling. Constantly coming up with things and constantly, being involved in things. But without the details and understanding what actually happened in some of these cases, I'm not going to sit there and smash the kid. You can do it if you'd like. But get off my lawn with the liberal political stuff. Again, we're not doing politics. We're not doing race. We're not doing irresponsible crap here. And if you don't like it, you can bounce. That's how this works. Adios. I believe in being fair to people. Choo Choo jumps in. Just here to say hi, Nick. Like and share. Thank you, Choo Choo. Always appreciate you for supporting this program. After the huddle, on the road today, delivering coffee. There you go. I don't drink coffee, but I'm sure the people that drink coffee, like my wife, my wife drinks gallons of coffee. I'm sure she's very appreciative of your career. And finally get to tap back in. Do you think we'll ever see us use a fullback like Devlin and Johnson? Could Bell be a gadget fullback, receiving back? Great question, ATH. And again, thanks for the super chat jumping in here. Thank you for that super chat. Means the world to me, as does Choo Choo's, as does Ryan's, which I'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I actually covered Jahm Bell at my Patreon page. And look, I'm not going to sit here and try to sell you all on it, but we do exclusive content at the Patreon page. It's $5 a month. We cover things on podcasts there, exclusive podcasts that we don't cover here. I went in depth on Jahm Bell a couple of weeks ago. I think Jahm Bell could be a secret weapon for this offense. I'm not telling you that he's going to catch 50 footballs and go crazy his rookie year, but I do think his flexibility, his versatility could mean an awful lot within the structure of AVP and what he's going to try to do offensively for this team. Jahm Bell, again, you go back to what he did at South Carolina. He played in the slot. He played outside. He played in the backfield. So I could see him, for example, being a short yardage back and really try to deceive the defense, right? Misdirection. That's what it's all about. I could see Bell making plays out of the backfield into the flat, being a yak machine. I could see him, lining up in the backfield and getting down the seam for a big play. So I do think there are things that Bell brings to the table that we haven't discussed here on this podcast in depth that would absolutely set him up as a contributor. And I think that versatility is part of the reason why the Patriots drafted him. Ryan James, wasn't Randy Moss a problem player? He worked out pretty well for us. Yeah, that's why you have to look at every player individually. When somebody says, oh, that guy partied, what are the details behind the partying? It's not illegal. It's not illegal to go have some drinks if you're 21 years old at a college party. It's not illegal. So what was the nature of the partying? Like I said, I've spent a lot of nights in my life hanging out with people and drinking beers and partying. Doesn't mean like I'm some irresponsible hack. Means I enjoy that part of life. Went down to New Orleans, Bourbon Street. Yeah, I went bananas on Bourbon Street. It's Bourbon Street. Like, of course. I'm not saying that everybody has to do it. If you don't like drinking beer, then don't drink beer. If you don't like partying, then don't party. But don't label everybody that likes to have beers and hang out as terrible people or problems, or they won't be successful at the NFL level. Yes, inevitably, some of these young men, they're not going to work out because maybe their work ethic does suck. Maybe the partying does get in the way. Johnny Manziel is a prime example of that. Jamarcus Russell is a prime example of that. Yes, those guys, the character concerns that you could have about those guys, it hurt them in the long run. But you have to weigh it, right? If you're Elliot Wolf, if you're Gerrod Mayo, you've got to weigh what are the particulars when it comes to what these guys are doing. And are you that concerned by it? And do you think with a little bit of help and leadership that you will get to the best of that young man and he will develop, he will be fine? There have been plenty of examples of guys, Chris Carter, have to find a fall guy, right? Chris Carter was somebody who partied a lot, but he figured it out. And he said, man, if I continue to party, I'm going to be out of the league. He got straight, went out there, and became one of the best receivers of his generation. Lawrence Taylor partied, never really learned, partied through his NFL career, still one of the greatest players of all time. Michael Irvin partied, right? Irvin had issues. Continued to play through it, one of the best receivers of his generation. Everybody is different. Everybody is an individual. Now, when you look at this draft class, again, it's Wolf's first draft class. It's his first draft process as far as being the leader of the organization. And I do think that, these quotes and all of this stuff, they do mean something because it shows us that Elliot Wolf is willing to take some risks in certain aspects. We also look at the collaborative process, and you have a lot of voices in the room. And so there are more voices to possibly justify drafting somebody who might have a work ethic risk because you have several people in the room saying, we think we can do that. We think we can work with that young man. We think we can get the best of him. Right? I also look at Mayo. We talk about Mayo being a player's coach. So when you marry that, I think this is going to be a challenge, right? This is something we've got to keep an eye on. Gerrod Mayo as the quote-unquote player's coach, is he going to be able to get the most out of these guys? If somebody does have a work ethic that stinks, can he get more out of that guy by connecting with the player? He's big on relationships. He's big on connecting. Can he get more out of these guys by connecting the way he does? Will his player's coach kind of mentality, will that stuff actually lead some of these work ethic issues and some of these, maturity issues for some of these guys? Will it actually lead them to being more mature? Will they try to take advantage of Mayo? And I think we go back to Jayvon Baker and the handling of the social media stuff. As I said, I thought Mayo was terrific at rookie minicamp handling Jayvon Baker. He came out, he said, yeah, we want these guys to have personalities. We want them to be individuals. But he said it, and now he's got to go out there and prove it, because if he doesn't prove it on the field, his veteran teammates, they're going to pretty much look at him as a fraud. And don't forget, the Patriots then decided to not have Jayvon Baker speak to the media, which, as I said, I don't think that was a coincidence whatsoever. So far, so good from what I've seen with Mayo dealing with somebody who might be trying to make it about himself or might have gone a little bit too far with some of the things. Mayo obviously pulled the reins in on Baker already. Didn't take him long. So I always remember the saying, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And I think sometimes people look at it and they say, oh, Gerrod Mayo's a player's coach, and they think he's going to have weakness. I would say We have no idea if that's the truth or not. We have no idea if that's how it's going to play out with Mayo. Because just because Mayo is friendlier than Belichick, just because he likes to have conversations and connect with players personally, and just because, other guys see him as a player's coach, doesn't mean he's going to be a weak dude. Behind closed doors, Mayo might pull these guys in and say, you got to stop acting a fool. So I think it's fascinating to watch Gerrod Mayo early in this tenure to see how he reacts to certain things and certain players and whether or not he does draw that line. It's a lot to put on him, though. He's a rookie head coach, and he's going to have a learning curve. Again, the Baker gun stuff is the far most serious stuff in this Bedard story. But a lot of this stuff is maturity and work ethic. And I bring you back to another Greg Bedard story a couple of years ago. Remember when Greg wrote about Christian Barmore? At that time, there were some people concerned about Barmore's, work ethic and his maturity level and whether or not he took things seriously, if he would ever get it. Well, what Barmore just got was the freaking bag because he took it serious. He worked his ass off. He continues to get better. The last 2 months of the 2023 season, he was one of the best defensive linemen in football. So, let's not throw everybody out here, right? Same author of that story. I don't know if it was some of the same executives that Greg spoke with, but there were questions about Barmore, and the Patriots traded up in the second round to draft Barmore. As a matter of fact, if you go back to Andrew Callahan's story a couple of months ago with, about Elliot Wolf, then it tells you that he had a role in Christian Barmore and drafting him and working that deal out to move up to get him. So Barmore is that prime example of somebody who had questions around him that came in and handled himself as a professional and is now one of your best players. If you're going to take swings from the 4th round to like the 7th round, right? Like if you're going to take some swings on guys that might have some work ethic issues or maturity issues, you take those swings in the later rounds. You don't want to swing and miss on a character guy in the 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round. That's why I said the Kaden Wallace one is something we've got to watch. Top of the 3rd round, position of need. And really, you have to believe in your locker room, right? Do you believe in your locker room? Do you believe in your locker room as far as the veterans in that locker room? And will they be able to help these young guys mature, process a lot of things off the field and on the field, and get the best out of them? You've got Matthew Slater there as somebody who is, the personality coach, somebody who can work with these guys, right? Matthew Slater is an advisor to Gerrod Mayo. He's a full-time employee. Can Matthew Slater talk to some of these guys and get the best of them? You're not going to save everybody if they need saving. We understand that. Some guys just aren't going to work out. But I think there's a lot unsaid. There's a lot unsaid, like within this story from some of these executives. There's some lack of detail from them, and we'll see how it all goes. But I think, some of these swings on talented guys are necessary. They're absolutely necessary. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. It means the world to us. Don't forget to don't forget to comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Trying to get to 3,500 subscribers. Rate and review Apple Pods and Spotify. Patreon page, going to do the Off the Cuff podcast this Friday. Got some really cool feedback on the first Off the Cuff. It's a little bit more laid back. I talk about things that aren't, hardo Boston sports stuff. That's on the Patreon. You can check it out. But I appreciate every single one of you for investing your time in this podcast and supporting it. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m., this has been The Nick Cattle Show.